The grand chamber of Nexus Prime Station stretched endlessly before Ambassador Lee Miho as he stood at the human delegation platform. His dark suit seemed almost plain compared to the incredible variety of alien life forms surrounding him. There were beings with iridescent scales that shifted colors, creatures with flowing tendrils instead of limbs, and entities that existed partially in dimensions humans could barely perceive. The year was 2847, and humanity had been part of this grand galactic community for exactly 200 years. 2 centuries of careful diplomacy, of learning alien customs, of proving that Earth's children deserved a place among the stars. Council Speaker Vrath sat upon the elevated judgment seat, his 4 eyes blinking in a slow sequence that showed his growing impatience. The speaker was a Valerian, a species known for bureaucracy and rigid adherence to protocol. His skin had the texture of aged leather, and his voice carried the weight of authority that came from presiding over thousands of disputes between hundreds of species. The humans protest again, Vrath hissed, his translator converting his native clicking sounds into galactic standard speech. What is your complaint this time, Ambassador Lee? Miho felt the familiar frustration rising in his chest, but he kept his voice steady and professional. He had been doing this job for 12 years now, and he knew that showing emotion would only make things worse. The council saw humans as overly emotional creatures, quick to anger and slow to reason. He would not give them more ammunition for that stereotype. The Kryneth Empire has violated our border for the 12th time this year, Miho began, his words measured and clear. 3 of our cargo vessels were destroyed in unprovoked attacks. 47 crew members are dead. They were civilian traders carrying medical supplies and farming equipment. They had no weapons. They posed no threat. A ripple of disinterest passed through the massive assembly chamber. Miho could see it in the way various aliens shifted in their seats, the way conversations continued in hushed tones, the way eyes wandered to data pads instead of focusing on his words. To them, this was just another minor complaint from a minor species. 47 dead humans meant nothing to beings who lived for centuries or existed as hive minds counting their population in billions. The Kryneth representative stepped forward from his platform across the chamber. General Thrak was an imposing figure even by Kryneth standards. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in natural chitinous armor that had evolved over millions of years to make his species nearly unstoppable warriors. His mandibles clicked together in what Miho had learned to recognize as amusement, though to human ears it sounded like the grinding of metal on metal. Accidents happen in contested space, human, General Thrak rumbled, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. Perhaps if your species was less concerned with profits and more with military strength, such unfortunate misfortunes would not befall you. His mandibles clicked faster, and several other species in the chamber made sounds that Miho recognized as laughter. You humans are like children playing in the deep ocean. You venture where you do not belong, and then you cry when the predators notice you. Miho felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to remain calm. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that he did not feel, and continued with his prepared statement. We request formal sanctions against the Kryneth Empire and an independent investigation into these attacks. We have provided evidence that these were deliberate acts of aggression, not accidents. The cargo vessels were clearly marked as civilian craft. They broadcast standard peaceful trading signals. The Kryneth warships ignored all hailing attempts and fired without warning. Denied, Council Speaker Vrath interrupted, his voice carrying the finality of a judge's gavel. The Kryneth have filed counter-complaints about human expansion into territories they claim as historical hunting grounds. This council sees no clear aggressor in this situation. Both parties are urged to resolve this matter diplomatically and to establish clearer boundaries to prevent future incidents. Miho wanted to scream. He wanted to slam his fist on the platform and demand that they actually look at the evidence he had spent weeks preparing. But he knew it would do no good. The council had made its decision before he had even opened his mouth. They always did when it came to disputes between powerful species like the Kryneth and newer members like humanity. As the session ended and the massive chamber began to empty, Miho stood alone at his platform for a moment, staring out at the viewport that showed the endless stars beyond. Captain Park Jaiwan approached from the observers section. She wore the crisp uniform of the Human Defense Fleet, though she rarely had any real cause to wear it at these diplomatic talks. Her presence was mostly symbolic, a reminder that humanity did have military forces, even if the galaxy seemed to forget that fact. Another waste of time? Park asked quietly, coming to stand beside him. They think we're weak, Miho replied, his voice barely above a whisper. His reflection in the viewport showed a tired man who had spent too many years fighting battles with words that should have been fought with action. 200 years of peaceful expansion, of following every rule, of trying to fit into their system, and they've mistaken our patience for inability. The Kryneth especially, Park observed, watching as General Thrax's massive form departed through one of the far exits, surrounded by his honor guard. Yes, Miho said, his expression darkening. General Thrax called us the galaxy's diplomats who forgot how to fight in his public broadcast yesterday. It's getting worse, Jaiwan. Every month, more incidents. More harassment. More deaths. And every month, the council tells us to be patient, to be diplomatic, to find peaceful solutions. Park Jaiwan had studied history extensively during her military training. She knew about real human history, not the sanitized version that humanity presented to the galactic community. She had read about the world wars, about nuclear weapons, about conflicts that consumed entire continents. She understood what her species was truly capable of when pushed beyond reason. Humanity had spent 2 centuries carefully hiding that side of themselves, showing the galaxy only their best qualities while keeping their capacity for violence carefully locked away. Maybe they should be careful what they wish for, Park said softly, almost to herself. Miho turned to look at her, seeing in her eyes the same thought that had been growing in his own mind. How long could humanity continue to absorb these attacks? How many more crew members would die while the council debated semantics? How many more times would they have to bow and smile while species like the Kryneth laughed at them? The answer, though neither of them knew it yet, would come sooner than anyone expected. The end. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so chaotic in living memory. Hundreds of species representatives talked over each other, their voices creating a cacophony of confusion and fear. Council Speaker Vrath stood at his elevated position, all 4 of his eyes darting nervously across the massive assembly hall. For the first time in 200 years, the human delegation platform stood completely empty. No ambassador, no staff, no observers. Just darkness where humanity's voice had always been. This is unprecedented, Vrath declared, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. We demand the humans explain their withdrawal immediately. But the human platform remained silent and dark. Communication requests went unanswered. Messages were not returned. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from galactic affairs overnight. The last human representatives had departed Nexus Prime Station exactly 72 hours ago, and since then, absolute silence. Ambassador Kelth stepped forward from the Varasian delegation area, his multiple limbs trembling visibly. The Varasians were a peaceful species, known for their scholarly pursuits and their role as cultural liaisons between different civilizations. Kelth had worked closely with the human delegation for over 15 years. He had shared meals with them, learned about their culture, and considered several of them close friends. Now those friends were gone, and he was terrified because he understood what their departure meant. Speaker Vrath, Kelth began, his voice shaking badly enough that his translator struggled to keep up. I believe we have made a terrible mistake. A catastrophic mistake. Explain yourself, Vrath demanded impatiently. The humans have always been dramatic. This is probably just another protest tactic. They will return when they realize we will not change our position on the Kryneth matter. No, Kelth said firmly, surprising himself with the strength in his voice. They will not return. Not as diplomats. The humans used a term when they left. They said they were declaring a state of total war. I researched their historical databases before they locked us out of their information networks. The chamber grew quieter as more representatives turned their attention to the trembling Varasian ambassador. There was something in his tone that commanded attention, something that spoke of genuine fear rather than political theater. Total war, Kelth continued, pulling up a holographic display with shaking limbs. It is a term from their pre-space age. It means the complete mobilization of every resource a society has toward the absolute destruction of an enemy. Not just military forces but industry, economy, technology, population. Everything focused on a single goal, complete victory at any cost. A murmur rippled through the chamber like a wave. Several species representatives began accessing their own historical databases, searching for information about humanity's past that they had never bothered to examine before. After all, the humans had been so peaceful, so diplomatic, so eager to follow the rules. Why would anyone need to study their violent history? Ambassador Prith of the Gorvan Collective stood from his seat, his crystalline body refracting light in patterns that showed his skepticism. Surely you exaggerate, Kelth. The humans are traders and diplomats. They are merchants and scientists. In 200 years they have never shown aggression toward any species. They have never even threatened military action. They are weak by any military standard. That is what I believe too, Kelth said sadly, manipulating the holographic controls with his trembling limbs. That is what we all believed. But I spent the last 3 days researching everything I could find about human history before they joined our community. What I found terrifies me beyond words. The holographic display shifted, showing images that made many of the assembled representatives gasp or make sounds of distress in their native languages. Cities reduced to rubble. Massive explosions that created mushroom-shaped clouds reaching into the sky. Trenches filled with millions of dead soldiers. Factories producing weapons at a scale that seemed impossible. Entire populations mobilized for industrial warfare. This, Kelth said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying through the now silent chamber, is what humans did to each other before they reached the stars. They fought wars that killed tens of millions. They created weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They developed strategies for fighting that involved the complete destruction of enemy populations and infrastructure. He pulled up more images. Bombed cities. Naval battles involving thousands of ships. Aerial bombardments that turned urban centers into smoking wastelands. Strategic bombing campaigns designed to break the will of entire nations. They called it World War, Kelth continued. They had 2 of them. The second one alone killed over 70 million humans. 70 million of their own species, killed by their own kind in just 6 years of fighting. He looked around the chamber at the shocked faces. And they won those wars through total war doctrine. Through the complete mobilization of their societies. Through the systematic destruction of their enemies' ability to fight back. Ambassador Pritha's crystalline structure had dimmed significantly, showing his growing concern. But that was before they joined us. They have been peaceful for 2 centuries. Surely they have moved beyond such barbarism. Have they? Kelth asked, pulling up another set of data. Or have they simply been controlling themselves? I found something else in their historical records. A human saying from their ancient past, speak softly and carry a big stick. It means to be polite and diplomatic, but to always have the capability for overwhelming force ready if needed. He manipulated the display again, showing recent intelligence reports that several species had filed over the years but that had never been taken seriously. Reports of human fleet movements that did not match official records. Sightings of shipyards and locations that were not on any official registry. Energy signatures from human space that suggested much larger industrial capacity than humanity had ever admitted to having. I believe, Kelth said slowly, that the humans have been building military capacity in secret for decades. Perhaps from the very beginning of their membership in our community. They showed us merchants and diplomats because that is who they wanted to be. But they always knew how to be warriors. They always kept that capability ready, just in case the galaxy proved to be as dangerous as their own history had been. The chamber erupted in confused discussion again. Council Speaker Vrath tried to restore order, his voice rising above the chaos. Even if this is true, the Kryneth Empire fields over 2,000 warships. They are one of the most powerful military forces in the known galaxy. What can the humans possibly do against such strength? Before Kelth could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. A junior Valerian officer rushed into the chamber, his movements showing panic that was highly unusual for his normally composed species. Speaker Vrath, the officer shouted. We are receiving emergency transmissions from Kryneth space. The humans have attacked. Multiple human fleets have emerged from quantum space at 17 different locations simultaneously. How many ships? Vrath demanded. The officer's voice shook as he answered. We do not know exactly. Kryneth sensors are detecting hundreds of vessels. No, thousands. They keep emerging from quantum space in coordinated waves. The numbers do not match any of our intelligence estimates for human fleet capacity. Kelth felt his limbs go weak. He had feared this, but hearing it confirmed was still shocking. The humans had not just been building ships in secret. They had been building entire fleets, hidden away in locations the galaxy had never discovered. Another transmission came through to the chamber, this one a priority military broadcast from the Kryneth Empire. General Thrax's face appeared on the main display, his mandibles no longer clicking with amusement. Instead, they trembled with something the galaxy had rarely seen from the proud Kryneth: fear. This is General Thrax of the Kryneth Imperial Fleet, he began, his voice lacking its usual confident rumble. We are under attack by human forces across multiple sectors. They appeared without warning. They are using tactics and weapons we have never encountered. We request immediate council intervention and... The transmission cut off suddenly, replaced by another signal. This one showed a human woman in a crisp military uniform. Her face was calm, almost serene, but her eyes held something that made even the bravest species representatives feel a chill of primal fear. "I am Admiral Nam Hyun-woo of the Human Defense Fleet," she said simply. "To the Galactic Council, humanity is now in a state of total war with the Kryneth Empire. We will accept no mediation, no negotiation, and no interference. The Kryneth chose to murder our children. Now they will learn what that choice costs." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Ambassador Kelf looked around at the shocked faces and whispered words that would be remembered for generations. "We mistook their patience for weakness. We mistook their diplomacy for inability. And now the Kryneth will pay the price for teaching us all that terrible lesson." The first major battle happened at Vokar Station, a massive Kryneth military fortress that floated in the darkness of space like an ancient monument to war. The station had never fallen in 600 years of Kryneth military history. It was considered absolutely impregnable, with defensive shields that could withstand the combined firepower of 100 warships and weapon systems that could destroy entire fleets. Generations of Kryneth warriors had trained there, and it was said that Vokar Station would stand until the stars themselves went dark. Commander Cho Minji stood calmly on the bridge of the human dreadnought named Retribution, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the tactical display with cold calculation. She was a small woman by human standards, barely reaching 160 centimeters in height, but her crew followed her commands without hesitation. Around her massive ship, 200 human warships dropped out of quantum space in perfect formation, appearing simultaneously as if choreographed by an invisible conductor. The precision of their arrival was not accidental. Every captain knew exactly where to be, exactly when to be there, and exactly what to do next. "All ships, this is Commander Cho," she said quietly into the fleet communication channel. Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried absolute authority. "Execute pattern Delta 7. Music protocol is active." Across the entire fleet, speakers began broadcasting music. But this was not the cheerful music of celebration or the marching songs of armies going to war. This was Mozart's Requiem, a funeral mass written centuries ago by a human composer who had died before completing it. The haunting sounds of the choir and orchestra filled the void of space, transmitted on every frequency the human ships used. To the Kryneth listening, it sounded like the universe itself was singing a song of death. War Chief Vent commanded Vokar Station from the central command chamber, surrounded by dozens of tactical officers and weapons specialists. He was an old warrior, his chitinous armor scarred from 100 battles, his mandibles worn from decades of combat. When he saw the human fleet appear on his sensors, his mandibles began clicking nervously, a reaction he had not experienced since he was a young soldier facing his first real battle. "Fire all defensive batteries," Vent shouted, his voice booming through the command chamber. "Show these soft creatures what Kryneth military might looks like. They dare to challenge Vokar Station? We will paint space with their debris." Energy beams lanced out from the station's massive weapon platforms. Plasma torpedoes streaked through the darkness like angry red stars. Missiles by the hundreds launched from hidden bays, their engines burning bright as they raced toward the human fleet. It was a display of firepower that had destroyed countless enemy forces over the centuries, a wall of death that nothing could survive. But the human ships moved like they were dancing. They shifted and turned with unnerving precision, their vessels flowing through the storm of fire in coordinated patterns that seemed impossible for different ships with different captains to achieve. It was as if the entire fleet was a single living organism, responding to threats with perfect synchronization. Ships that should have been hit somehow were not there when the weapons arrived. Formations that looked vulnerable suddenly shifted into defensive positions that protected each other perfectly. "Impossible," Vent snarled, watching his display in disbelief. "No species can coordinate like that. They must be using some kind of shared mind connection." Lieutenant Park Sunho sat at the tactical station aboard Retribution, his fingers moving rapidly across holographic controls. Around him, dozens of other crew members worked with the same focused intensity, their faces illuminated by the glow of their displays. "Commander," he reported calmly, "their firing patterns are predictable. Their defensive doctrine has not evolved in centuries. They rely on overwhelming firepower rather than precision." "Exploit it," Commander Cho ordered simply. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The human fleet split into 12 separate groups with movements so smooth they looked rehearsed, though every action was calculated in real time by quantum computers working in perfect synchronization with human intuition and experience. Each group attacked from a different angle, creating overlapping fields of fire that left no safe positions for Krynith ships to occupy. The humans did not fire randomly or waste a single shot. Every energy beam had a target. Every missile was guided by artificial intelligence systems that predicted enemy movements 3 seconds in advance. Every torpedo strike was calculated to maximize damage while minimizing ammunition expenditure. The Krynith had superior firepower in their individual ships, but the humans fought with an efficiency that made raw power almost irrelevant. Krynith warships began exploding with terrifying regularity. One moment a vessel would be maneuvering to intercept human fighters, the next moment it would be expanding debris field. The humans targeted propulsion systems first, crippling ships so they could not escape or maneuver effectively. Then they methodically destroyed weapons systems, leaving the vessels helpless. Finally, they offered surrender terms and only fired killing shots on ships that refused to stand down. Warchief Vent tried desperately to call for reinforcements, but when he activated the long-range communications system, nothing happened. The display showed that the communication arrays were functioning perfectly, but no signal was getting through. Human electronic warfare had created an invisible bubble around the entire battlefield, jamming every frequency, blocking every transmission, isolating Valkyr Station completely from the rest of the Krynith Empire. "They planned this," Vent whispered, his mandibles trembling. "They knew exactly how we would respond. They predicted every move we would make." He tried to order a retreat, to pull his ships back to the protection of the station's heavy defensive shields. But when his vessels turned to flee, they discovered that the humans had already positioned ships along every escape vector. Somehow, in the chaos of battle, the human fleet had deployed mines throughout the surrounding space. Invisible, undetectable mines that only activated when Krynith ships tried to pass through certain zones. The first Krynith destroyer that attempted to escape hit 3 mines simultaneously and simply ceased to exist, vaporized in a flash of light so bright that sensors automatically dimmed to protect the observers. The second ship managed to avoid the mines but flew directly into the firing solution of a waiting human cruiser that had been sitting silent and dark, appearing like a ghost from the void. Valkyr Station itself came under direct assault 40 minutes into the battle. Human bombers, small fast ships carrying devastating payloads, weaved through the defensive fire with the same uncanny coordination the larger fleet had shown. They struck the station's shield generators with surgical precision, and within minutes the supposedly impenetrable barriers began to flicker and fail. Commander Cho watched the tactical display with no expression of triumph or satisfaction on her face. This was not a sport or a game. This was war, and war was serious business that required complete focus and absolute professionalism. "Target the station's command center," she ordered. "Single shot. Precision strike. Minimize casualties." A railgun aboard Retribution fired once. The projectile, a solid slug of dense metal accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, crossed the distance to Valkyr Station in less than a second. It punched through the weakened shields, through layers of armor that had withstood 6 centuries of attacks, and struck the command center with pinpoint accuracy. The explosion was contained, shaped by the projectiles designed to destroy the command systems while leaving the rest of the station mostly intact. Warchief Vent had just enough time to see the projectile coming on his display before everything went white. When emergency systems restored minimal power minutes later, he found himself lying in the ruins of his command chamber, his armor cracked, his body broken but alive. Human soldiers were already boarding the station, moving through corridors with weapons ready but not firing indiscriminately. Commander Cho's voice came through on every speaker system that still functioned, broadcasting in perfect Krynith language. "Valkyr Station has fallen. All Krynith personnel are ordered to surrender immediately. Medical teams are standing by to treat the wounded. Any further resistance will be met with lethal force. This battle is over." Valkyr Station, which had stood unconquered for 600 years, had fallen in 47 minutes. 6 massive human dreadnoughts floated in perfect formation above Thraka Prime, the homeworld of the Krynith Empire. Around them, 300 support vessels created a blockade so complete that not even a small shuttle could escape the planet's gravity well without human permission. On the surface far below, 8 billion Krynith civilians looked up at their skies with growing dread, watching the human warships that blotted out the stars like dark omens of destruction. Admiral Nam Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, her hands resting on the railing as she looked down at the planet through the massive viewport. Somewhere down there were the leaders who had ordered the deaths of human children. Somewhere in those cities were the military commanders who had laughed while broadcasting images of burning human colonies. Somewhere on that world was Emperor Kresh himself, the ruler who had personally approved the attacks that killed 847,000 innocent young lives. Around Admiral Nam, the bridge crew worked in disciplined silence. There was no celebration, no triumphant music, no joy in what they were doing. This was not a victory to celebrate. This was justice being delivered, cold and calculated and absolutely necessary. Admiral, Captain Onyuna reported from her station, her voice steady and professional. The Krynith government is broadcasting unconditional surrender on all frequencies. Emperor Kresh himself is pleading for mercy. He says they will accept any terms, agree to any conditions, if we will just spare their homeworld. Admiral Nam did not even glance at the communication display. Ignore it, she said calmly, her voice carrying no emotion at all. Open a channel to the Galactic Council. Within moments, the holographic display flickered to life, showing Council Speaker Vrath surrounded by dozens of alien ambassadors from across the galaxy. Every single face showed fear. Some tried to hide it better than others, but the terror was there in their eyes, in their body language, in the way they held themselves. They had watched humanity dismantle the Krynith military piece by piece over 3 months of relentless warfare, and now they were watching the human fleet surround the Krynith homeworld itself. Admiral Nam, Vrath began, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly in a pattern that showed extreme stress. The Krynith have surrendered. Completely and unconditionally. You must accept. Galactic law demands that you accept surrender when it is offered. The Krynith have not met our terms, Admiral Nam replied, her voice as calm as if she were discussing the weather rather than the fate of billions of lives. Therefore their surrender is meaningless. Ambassador Kelth pushed forward through the crowd of alien representatives, his limbs trembling as they always did now when he had to speak with human military commanders. Admiral, please. I know what they did was monstrous. I understand your anger. But you have already destroyed their military. You have taken their ability to wage war. Surely that is enough. Surely nothing, Admiral Nam said, and for the first time, a hint of steel entered her voice. Let me remind the Council exactly what our terms are. Complete and permanent dismantling of all Krynith military forces. Occupation of all Krynith worlds by human peacekeeping forces for a minimum of 50 years. War crimes trials for every single officer who participated in ordering or executing attacks on civilian targets. Reparations calculated at 1 million credits per human life lost, which means the Krynith owe us 3.7 trillion credits. And total restructuring of the Krynith government to ensure such atrocities can never happen again. A counselor from the Threxian delegation spoke up, his voice shaking. Those terms would bankrupt their entire civilization. It would take them generations to recover. How can you demand such punishment? Admiral Nam turned her gaze to the holographic image of the Threxian counselor, and he actually stepped backward from the intensity in her eyes. They murdered our children, she said simply. They did not just kill soldiers or destroy military targets. They specifically targeted schools, hospitals, nurseries, and family habitats. They killed 847,000 children between the ages of 1 day old and 16 years old. They broadcast images of the burning habitats as entertainment. They laughed about it. She took a step closer to the holographic display. Justice is not always merciful, counselor. Sometimes justice is simply giving people exactly what they deserve. The Krynith wanted to show the galaxy what happens to weak species. Now humanity is showing the galaxy what happens to species that murder children. Emperor Kresh's hologram suddenly joined the transmission, his massive form seeming to fill the display. His mandibles quivered in a way that showed absolute terror, something no one had ever seen from a Krynith emperor before. Please, Admiral Nam. I beg you. My people are innocent. The civilians did nothing wrong. Please spare them. Admiral Nam studied the emperor for a long moment, her face showing no sympathy whatsoever. Do you know what you showed us when you targeted our children, Emperor Kresh? When you specifically ordered attacks on the most vulnerable members of our species. I was not the one who gave that order directly, Kresh stammered, his translator struggling to keep up with his panicked speech patterns. It was General Thrak who. We recovered the communication logs, Admiral Nam interrupted. We have your voice authorization for the battle plan. We have your personal approval of the target list. We have your message to General Thrak congratulating him on sending such a strong message to weak species. She leaned forward. You personally chose to target children because you believed it would break our will to resist. You wanted to terrorize us into submission. The Emperor's mandibles clicked desperately. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. We did not understand what humanity was capable of. If we had known. If you had known we could fight back, you would not have attacked, Admiral Nam finished for him. That is not remorse, Emperor. That is simply fear of consequences. You are not sorry for what you did. You are sorry that it did not work. She turned to her tactical officer. Commander Lee Dong-hyun, begin Operation Cleansing. Wait! Multiple voices shouted simultaneously from the council transmission. What is Operation Cleansing? Admiral, please explain what you are about to do. Admiral Nam pulled up a holographic tactical display that showed the entire Krynith Empire. Red markers indicated thousands of locations across dozens of worlds. For the next 90 days, human forces will systematically dismantle every single military installation, shipyard, weapons factory, military academy, and defense platform in Krynith space. Every location that can produce weapons or train soldiers will cease to exist. We will do this methodically, carefully, and completely. That will destroy our entire defense infrastructure. Emperor Kresh wailed. We will have no ability to protect ourselves. What if other species attack us? What if pirates raid our worlds? Then you will learn what it is like to depend entirely on diplomatic solutions and peace treaties for your protection, Admiral Nam replied without sympathy. Just like you forced humanity to do for 2 centuries while you ignored our complaints and mocked our attempts at peaceful resolution. The difference is, unlike the Galactic Council, we will actually help you if you are genuinely attacked by others. Because unlike you, we do not target innocent civilians. She gestured to the tactical display. Every military target will be given 1 hour to evacuate all personnel before we destroy it. Any civilian caught in the vicinity will be provided with immediate medical care and temporary shelter. We are not here to kill your people, Emperor. We are here to ensure your military can never threaten anyone ever again. Down on the surface of Thraka Prime, in a deep bunker beneath the Imperial Palace, General Thrak watched the human fleet through external cameras. He had been in hiding since the fall of Valkyr Station, moving from one secure location to another, always staying one step ahead of human search teams. But he knew his time was running out. They are not going to destroy the planet, his aide Subcommander Krell said with obvious relief. They are only targeting military installations. That is worse, Thrak replied quietly. If they wanted simple revenge, they would glass our worlds from orbit and be done with it. But they are not driven by revenge. They are driven by something far more terrifying, calculated justice. They want us to survive, to live with what we have done, to spend generations rebuilding under their watchful eyes. They want every Krynith child for the next 100 years to grow up knowing that their species provoked the wrath of humanity and lost everything because of it. He watched as human dropships began descending toward the planet's surface, heading for military bases with precision that showed they knew exactly where every target was located. They are not monsters. That is what makes them so frightening. They know exactly what they are doing. Every action is deliberate, calculated, purposeful. They are not consumed by rage or hatred. They are simply removing a threat with the same efficiency they would use to remove a malfunctioning part from a machine. Subcommander Krell's mandibles trembled. What have we done, General? We woke something that had learned to sleep peacefully, Thrak said. We mistook their patience for weakness, their diplomacy for cowardice, their restraint for inability. And now we face the consequences of that mistake. He stood slowly, his old body aching from weeks of stress and hiding. Contact the humans. Tell them I am ready to surrender. Tell them General Thrak will face trial for his crimes. It is time to stop running. The cleansing began exactly as Admiral Nam had promised. Human forces moved through Krynith space like a precision surgical instrument, methodical and unstoppable. Military bases received 1-hour warnings to evacuate all personnel, then were reduced to rubble by controlled demolitions. Weapons factories were shut down, their machinery carefully confiscated and transported away on human cargo ships. Shipyards that had built Krynith warships for centuries were systematically dismantled, piece by piece, until nothing remained but empty space where proud vessels had once taken shape. But something strange happened that confused observers throughout the galaxy. While one group of human soldiers destroyed military targets, another group provided humanitarian aid to every civilian population they encountered. It was a contradiction that many species could not understand. How could the same military force be so ruthlessly efficient at destruction while simultaneously being so carefully compassionate toward the innocent? Lieutenant Quan Min-jae led relief efforts on the Krynith colony world of Vrakar 3, a small planet that housed about 2 million Krynith civilians and had contained a medium-sized military garrison. While demolition teams worked on destroying the garrison's buildings and weapons storage facilities, His unit moved through the nearby civilian settlement distributing food, medicine, and temporary shelters to displaced Kryneth families who had lost their homes when the military evacuated. The work was exhausting and emotionally draining. Many of the Kryneth civilians were terrified of the human soldiers, convinced that they would all be killed as revenge for what the Kryneth military had done to human colonies. Some hid in their homes and refused to come out. Others watched the humans with suspicious eyes, waiting for the cruelty they were certain would come. A Kryneth female named Shess approached Lieutenant Quan cautiously, her body language showing extreme fear but also desperate need. She carried a young Kryneth child in her arms, a juvenile that was clearly sick and weak. Behind her, 2 more children clung to her legs, their large eyes watching the human soldier with terror. "Please," Shess said through the translation device that humans had distributed to the civilians. "My child is sick. The military doctors left when your forces came. There is no one to help. Please, I know we are your enemy but she is just a child." Quan looked at the sick juvenile, seeing the way its small body trembled with fever, seeing the way its breathing came in short, difficult gasps. He had joined the military to protect humanity, to serve his species, to do his duty. But looking at this scared mother and her sick child, he saw only someone who needed help. "Come with me," he said gently, gesturing toward the medical tent that his unit had set up. "Our doctors will help your child. No cost, no conditions. We treat everyone who needs help." Shess's mandibles dropped open in shock. "But why? We are Kryneth. Our government attacked your children. Why would you help us?" Quan met her eyes steadily. "Because you did not attack our children. Your government did. Your military did. We are not here to punish civilians who had no part in those decisions. We are here to ensure your military can never hurt anyone again." He led her to the medical tent where human doctors and medics worked alongside a few Kryneth medical professionals who had chosen to stay and help their people. A human doctor named Han Jisoo examined the sick child quickly and efficiently, her experienced hands gentle as she checked vital signs and ran diagnostic scans. "Respiratory infection," Dr. Han said after a moment. "Treatable with antibiotics. The child will be fine in a few days." She prepared an injection, administered the medicine carefully, and then handed Shess a bottle of pills. "Give her one of these every 12 hours until they are gone. Bring her back if she gets worse but she should recover fully." Shess took the medicine with trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears. "I do not understand you humans. You destroy our military bases with one hand and heal our children with the other. How can you be so cruel and so kind at the same time?" Lieutenant Quan thought about how to answer that question. Finally he said quietly, "We are not cruel. We are just. There is a difference. Your military chose to target the most vulnerable members of our society, knowing they were innocent, knowing they could not defend themselves. We are removing your military's ability to ever do that again. But you and your children are not guilty of those crimes. You deserve to be treated with basic human decency." He gestured around at the bustling relief operation where human soldiers were helping Kryneth civilians rebuild their lives. "We remember who we are. We are warriors when we must be, but we are also healers, builders, and protectors. Your leaders forgot that about us. They saw only our patience and mistook it for weakness. Now they are learning the truth." Shess looked down at her child, who was already breathing easier as the medicine began to work. "This is humiliating for my people. To be conquered, to be occupied, to need your help to survive." "Yes," Quan agreed softly. "War is humiliating. Defeat is humiliating. Perhaps that humiliation will help your species remember this moment the next time your leaders suggest attacking peaceful civilizations. Perhaps your children will grow up understanding that there are consequences for cruelty." Over the following weeks, the pattern repeated across dozens of Kryneth worlds. Human forces methodically destroyed every military installation while simultaneously providing unprecedented humanitarian support to civilian populations. Field hospitals treated thousands of sick and injured Kryneth. Food distribution centers fed millions who had lost access to supplies when military logistics collapsed. Engineering teams helped rebuild civilian infrastructure that had been damaged in the fighting. 5 years passed. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Kryneth Empire no longer existed as a military power. Their worlds continued under human occupation, but it was an occupation unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Human administrators worked alongside Kryneth civilians to rebuild their society from the ground up, teaching them new ways of governance that included checks and balances to prevent future military aggression. At the Galactic Council, a new session was taking place. Ambassador Lee Miho had returned to his platform, representing humanity once again. But now when he spoke, the entire chamber fell silent to listen. No one interrupted him. No one dismissed his concerns. The galaxy had learned its lesson about what happened when humanity's patience ran out. The question many species have asked, Miho said to the assembled representatives, is why humanity showed such mercy to Kryneth civilians while being so ruthless toward their military. The answer is simple: we tried to show you who we wanted to be for 200 years. We showed you merchants and diplomats and scientists because those are our preferred roles in the galactic community. But the Kryneth forced us to show you who we are when those preferred roles are not enough. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that now watched him with respect mixed with lingering fear. We are a species that perfected warfare over thousands of years before reaching the stars. We learned every lesson about violence that a civilization can learn. And the most important lesson we learned is this: the ability to destroy must be balanced with the wisdom to show mercy. Power without restraint makes you a monster. We refused to become monsters, even when facing those who showed no such restraint themselves. Ambassador Kelth stood from his platform, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. The humans have taught us all something profound. They showed us that true strength is not the ability to inflict harm, but the wisdom to choose when to use force and when to show compassion. The Kryneth mistook their patience for weakness. We all did. That was our failure as much as it was the Kryneth's crime. On Vracker 3, now 5 years after the occupation began, Lieutenant Quan Minjae walked through the rebuilt settlement. Shes saw him from her doorway and approached with a smile, her children following behind her. The sick child he had helped years ago was now healthy and strong, playing with other young Kryneth in the street. Lieutenant Quan, Shes said warmly. Thank you for stopping by. Will you share a meal with us? It is the least we can do to thank you for saving my daughter's life. Quan smiled and nodded. As he sat in the simple home, sharing food with a family that had once been his enemy, he thought about how strange and wonderful it was that friendship could grow from the ashes of war. The Kryneth had learned their lesson. The galaxy had learned its lesson. And humanity had proven that it could be both the fiercest warrior and the most compassionate friend, depending on what the situation required. The last species that made humanity truly angry had been annihilated as a military threat. But they had been saved as a people, given a chance to become something better than they had been. And in that contradiction, in that balance between justice and mercy, humanity had shown the galaxy who they really were.